he has proven to be very litigious in the past, but the money did the talking here, don't you think? That in the end, all the sponsors pulling out, players saying they're not going to show up, the fans that wouldn't come to the games. I don't think he's got a choice. As the bylaws state, if 3/4 of the owners can agree, and
Sure.
Silva wouldn't have done this if he didn't do a head count beforehand, and he indicated that as much in the Q&A today. Jerry, he's going to have to sell this thing.
Well, I would think at some point he will, just because the value of the franchise is going to go down to, almost nothing. You're going to have real troubles drafting people that want to play with that team as long as he's the owner. So something, I think the response ultimately will be economic. But it gives you, it's such a great feeling to see how unified the country is on this. Forget just basketball.
Yep.
But it's for once, there's no one on the other side. Because, if you have any sense of decency, there is no other side.
Well, Limbaugh tried to take it, I think. But
well, it's just, what you should say to the political pundits is just stop it. This is wrong. This is against everything we teach our kids about how to treat human beings. This is 2014, for God's sakes. We're not, America in 1950 or 38 or where we got to just stop it. And I think the response has been great. There's unity on this. And good Lord, to say African Americans have no place in the NBA, excuse me, what are we watching here? It reminds me, when I was a kid, the NBA was all white. And there was this globetrotter, Sweetwater Clifton.
Whose name was mentioned today.
Yes, Sweetwater Clifton, who was my first basketball hero as a kid living in New York. Used to play at the 69th Street Armory. Right, because the Madison Square Garden wasn't available during February because of the ice capades or something, the circus. So anyway, but he was the first African American to play in the NBA. And they told him at the time, and this was in his biography, that here he was, this great globetrotter. He was athletically superior to most of the players in the NBA, but he wasn't allowed to dunk. He wasn't allowed to do jump shots. He had to shoot a two-hand set shot. He was 6'8", one of the tallest guys in the league, and this was before the three-point play. He had to stay in the backcourt and only shoot two-hand set shots because they didn't want him overshadowing. That's the kind of racism we had in the NBA back in the 50s. And to have this guy talk like he's talking, like, excuse me, have you not lived for the last 60 or 70 years? So great response by the American people and the NBA.
I also thought what was refreshing today, by the way, welcome to the show, Jerry Springer.
Nice to be here.
Nice to have you here.
And I never threw a chair here, and I've been here for 5 minutes.
We've hidden all the chairs except for the ones we're sitting in. The other refreshing part is we see so many scandals today in so many different walks of life where the result is half measures or additional study or conversation. I mean, this thing blew up on Saturday. Today is Tuesday. And to see something this definitive and this straightforward from the new commissioner, to me, was incredibly refreshing and surprising. I mean, we were trying to figure out what the penalty was going to be.
We heard the rumblings. Listen, people we respect were, and I thought it was a little presumptuous, but telling players they need to make a more definitive statement, they need not to suit up tonight, saying that if there's an indefinite suspension, you have the leverage, push the league to do whatever. It was interesting because we were talking this morning, the planning meeting. Well, what happens? The conversation will probably be, will the players play tonight or not? As soon as the 30 minutes were over after the Q&A, it was clear. The league, threw a knockout. They weren't going to win on points here. And Dominic, to Jerry's point, the coach of the Clippers, Doc Rivers, who himself a player, won championships as a coach with the Celtics. In learning about his biography, after he played it, and this isn't back in the 60s, he had his house burned down because he was married to a white woman in San Antonio. I learned things about him. And for him to have to bite tongue and for the players to have to think, wait, this is the plantation system. I'm working for the man who wants me to keep him down here and make money with, doing toiling on the court. it was just an impossible situation. And I'm so glad, as Andrew said, there wasn't some halfway measure here, because, then we would have had another conversation. Who's on what side?
But Richard, it's not over yet.
I'm with you.
It's not over yet.
I'm with you.
He still owns the team. You cannot make him sell the team. To Jerry's point, if he continues to hold on, the value of the Clippers will go down to nothing. So he's a smart businessman. No one can call him a fool. So he probably won't let it get to that point. But nobody in this country or anywhere else can make him sell the Clippers.
Well,
as to Doc Rivers.
Yes.
Very telling, because the coach of the team, he sets the tone for all of these players, in particular his African-American players. He is a legend, Doc Rivers. And if he comes out and shows his anger, and he has to be steaming, I'm steaming.
And the head of the Players Union was also in the Clippers, Chris Paul.
That's right.
And he had to find basically a surrogate. He had to go out to Mayor Johnson.
That's right.
To do the talking for him, because it was so ugly, so complicated. I'm with you, it's not over. We're going to talk about
But after a while, what is the ownership worth anyway? In other words, haven't we already won the moral argument? So now he can't come to the games. He can't even go, he can't be in the arena. He can't be involved in any decision making. So technically he's an owner, but no one's playing for him anymore. He can't call any of the shots. He's not allowed to be. If the same thing happened to Marge Schott, in fact, I was anchoring the news at the time in Cincinnati. And I was anchoring the news on the station that televised the Cincinnati Reds games. And Marge Schott had done an interview where she had made some reference to Hitler and the Nazis, totally inappropriate.
But it wasn't such a bad guy or something.
Yes,
right? Yeah,
right, exactly. And at the end of every newscast, I did a commentary, just like I do a final thought on my silly show. But on the news, I did a serious commentary on what was happening in the news that day. And I went after Marge Schott, saying, when you have a major league franchise, you represent that community. If you have a plumbing company and you want to use the name of the city, big deal, because you're not speaking for the city. But when you're the Cincinnati Reds, when you're the LA Clippers, you are borrowing the name of the entire community, because you get all the sports pages, you get all the coverage, you get 5 minutes on every newscast. In other words, you are the city. So therefore,
I'm curious, what was the reaction after you did it? Overwhelmingly supportive or not?
Supportive. But God bless the ownership of the station, because I can tell you that we televised the Reds games. It was a $20 million contract, which back in the late 70s, 80s, back in the 80s, that was a lot of money for a local TV station. Our biggest client by far. And they were panicked that my commentary, which they had no legal right to censor, my contract said I can say what I want, and they can fire me, but they can't censor it. So they were, they held their breath. And
shocking. You saying something that could get people nervous. Unbelievable.
But God bless them.
Yeah.
They didn't discipline me at all. They let me. But it's same case. Same case. It was the Nazis instead of going after.
Well, that's one of the questions I want to ask when we come back here. This is a clear line here. But what if he chose another group to make remarks of? Have we set a line, or as some have said, are we going down a slippery slope? As always, everybody, you chime in on our conversation here. Go to Facebook, sound off on our question, as well as Twitter. Do you agree with the commissioner's decision? I'm going to expect or hope the overwhelming answer is yes. All right, coming up next here, as mentioned, one owner who said he supported the league's decision today. Nonetheless, Mark Cuban said, I don't like what Sterling had to say, but are we crossing the line here today where free speech is now entered into, and maybe with some surprising consequences? Stay with us. We'll be right back.